In 2019, federal investigators in Los Angeles uncovered a criminal enterprise that shook the city's political elite to its absolute core. Hidden behind the walls of a seemingly ordinary downtown commercial property, dubbed by locals as the Amber Building, lay the headquarters of a massive human trafficking and extortion ring. For nearly 2 decades, a ruthless crime boss held dozens of young women captive under total surveillance. But this wasn't just an isolated underground ring. To protect his multi-million-dollar empire, the operator used these victims as leverage, offering free entertainment to high-ranking city officials, inspectors, and politicians, creating an unbreakable shield of corruption. By the time the dust settled, this single syndicate had illegally amassed over $1 billion in real estate and assets. How did one man rise from absolute poverty to control the dark underbelly of a major American city, and what finally brought his empire crashing down? Our story begins with a man named Frank Vance. Born in 1973 in an impoverished town in rural Ohio, Frank dropped out of high school early to chase the American dream in California. He started out using his basic tailoring skills to open a small apparel shop in LA, but the modest retail income couldn't keep pace with his massive financial ambitions. Frank quickly realized that the real money in the city's underbelly wasn't in altering clothes, it was in exploiting people. Using his life savings, he opened a high-end wellness and day spa. At first, he lacked staff, so he ruthlessly coerced his own spouse into working long hours, using extreme psychological manipulation and threats of violence to keep her compliant. Generating over $1,000 a day in cash, Frank tasted the power of absolute control. He began aggressively recruiting young women from out of state, promising them legitimate hospitality jobs, room and board, but the moment they arrived, the trap snapped shut. Frank didn't just want to be a low-level operator, he wanted high society status. He began using his massive cash reserves to target the people who could shut him down. By 2004, Frank had successfully compromised senior officials within the local Department of Building and Safety and the Commerce Commission, specifically a chief inspector named Arthur Sterling and a zoning director named Donald Brooks. With backing from the very people meant to enforce the law, Frank expanded into commercial real estate. He hired a network of aggressive enforcers to run a massive extortion racket, the Racket. Through intimidation, fraudulent contracts, and manufactured legal threats, Frank's syndicate forced independent business owners to sell over 1,300 storefronts at rock-bottom prices. He then released them at astronomical rates. As his bank accounts swelled, his political circle grew. Within a few short years, Frank had bought off nearly every influential city official in his district. He used these compromised leaders to secure exclusive access to city redevelopment zones, fraudulently obtaining close to $150 million in government relocation grants. As Frank began rubbing shoulders with higher-profile figures, he decided his standard wellness spas were too low-end for his elite clientele. He established a prestigious talent and dance academy, luring in aspiring performers from across the country. Once inside, their documents were confiscated and they were moved into his crown jewel, a heavily fortified luxury complex near City Hall known as the Amber Building. The interior was renovated to extreme luxury standards, but it was practically a high-tech prison. Total surveillance. High-definition security cameras were placed every 30 feet to track the victim's every move. Biometric locks. Every floor required specific electronic keycard access, guarded 24/7 by private security. Acoustic dampening. Every room was outfitted with industrial-grade soundproofing SA, so no cries for help could ever reach the street. Escape routes. Hidden doors were installed behind mirrors, allowing compromised politicians to slip out through secret alleys if law enforcement ever approached. Frank even integrated his operation with legitimate media, investing in a local cable crime watch program called Secure LA. He used the show's prestigious reputation to recruit educated young women under the guise of TV internships, feeding them directly into his trafficking network. Frank's empire seemed invincible, but a single act of bravery would bring it all down. A young woman named Chloe had applied for a legitimate teaching position at Frank's dance academy. Instead, she was trapped and subjected to months of severe coercion and psychological abuse. Despite developing severe depression, Chloe never stopped looking for an exit. In late 2017, during a routine security guard shift change, she saw an unlocked door and ran. Terrified of Frank's reach, she didn't dare go to the local precinct. She knew that previously, another escaped victim who tried to file a report had her file leaked directly back to Frank by a paid-off officer. Chloe fled to a secure domestic sanctuary out of state. From there, encouraged by her family, she began meticulously documenting every piece of evidence she could find, sending reports to federal agencies. For months, Frank's local political umbrella kept those reports buried, but the political tides were about to turn. In 2018, a massive federal RICO task force was launched to clean up municipal corruption across the state. Chloe seized the moment, bypassing local authorities entirely and handing over her thick dossier to federal prosecutors, while allies amplified the story on independent digital media platforms. Realizing the walls were closing in, Frank desperately tried to scrub his digital footprint, dissolving his shell corporations overnight and abandoning the Amber Building. In May 2019, a compromised city council chief, Luke Evans, secretly tipped Frank off that an arrest warrant had been signed, urging him to flee the state. Frank scrambled back to his rural Ohio hometown to hide out. But federal agents were already one step ahead. The very next day, an FBI tactical unit surrounded his hideout and took him into custody without incident. The trial concluded in late 2020. Frank Vance was hit with a mountain of charges, including human trafficking, racketeering, grand fraud, and systemic bribery. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, and his entire billion-dollar real estate portfolio was seized by the government. Furthermore, 13 high-ranking city officials, inspectors, and executives who acted as his protective shield were stripped of their positions and handed prison sentences ranging from 2 to 17 years. When the case initially broke, media coverage was strangely quiet, with major networks prioritizing celebrity gossip over the massive political scandal. But thanks to the bravery of survivors like Chloe and independent journalists, the dark legacy of the Amber Building was finally exposed to the light.